The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through the massive crystal doors. Her simple black suit looked painfully ordinary among the flowing robes and biomechanical armor of the other delegates. The Zephyrian representative's tentacles twitched with what might have been amusement. The Korthak delegation's multiple eyes tracked her movement like predators watching prey. "So these are the humans," High Chancellor Vextar rumbled, his voice echoing from the golden throne at the chamber's center. The reptilian leader's scales shifted from deep blue to mocking purple. "The species that thinks manners will save them." Sarah smiled politely and bowed. "Honored Chancellor, we appreciate this opportunity to join the galactic community. Earth offers friendship and cooperation to all peaceful civilizations." A ripple of laughter passed through the assembled aliens. The Korthak War Prime leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the marble floor. "How refreshing. Another prey species volunteering for subjugation." "We prefer partnership," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "Partnership." Vextar's eyes narrowed to golden slits. "You control one small world in an insignificant system. We command 17 star systems and 300 billion subjects. What could you possibly offer us?" Sarah's smile never wavered. "Perhaps we could discuss trade agreements, cultural exchange. We have many interesting technologies." Silence. The Chancellor's voice cut through, her words like a blade. "You will listen to our terms. Earth will provide 30% of its population for labor. Your military will be disbanded. Your government will answer to Galactic Council authority. In return, we will allow your species to continue existing." The chamber erupted in approving growls and clicks from the assembled delegates. This was how it always went with new species. Submit or be crushed. The galaxy had been peaceful for 3 centuries because everyone understood the rules. Sarah's hands clasped behind her back. Her smile finally faded. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "but that's not acceptable." The laughter died instantly. War Prime's 4 arms flexed, revealing weapons ports that had been hidden beneath his ceremonial armor. Did this soft creature just refuse the Council's generosity? "We came here hoping for friendship," Sarah continued, her voice growing colder with each word. "We brought gifts, offered knowledge, extended open hands. But it seems the galaxy prefers a different language." Vextar rose from his throne, towering 12 feet above the human ambassador. "Are you threatening the Galactic Council, little human?" Sarah's eyes met his without flinching. Something shifted in her expression. Something that made the nearest delegate step backward unconsciously. "No, Chancellor. I'm not threatening anyone." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small communication device. "I'm simply updating my government on the cultural situation here." She pressed a single button. Across the galaxy, every human military base, research facility, and colonial outpost received the same 2-word message that Earth had prepared for this exact scenario. Directive 7. The chamber's communication array suddenly blazed to life. Admiral Reyes appeared on the main screen, his weathered face grim. Behind him, the bridge of humanity's newest warship hummed with barely contained energy. "Ambassador Chen," he said, formally, "please inform the Council that Earth withdraws its application for peaceful membership. As of this moment, we consider all Galactic Council space to be contested territory." The screen went dark. In the suffocating silence that followed, Sarah straightened her jacket and smiled that same polite smile. "Gentlemen," she said sweetly, "I believe you're about to discover what humans are really like when someone threatens our families." War Prime's massive fist slammed against the council table, cracking the ancient crystal surface. "Impossible! Their fleet consisted of 12 ships. We counted them ourselves." Admiral Kethavar of the Zephyrian Navy floated above his communication console, his bioluminescent patches flashing urgent patterns. "High Chancellor, I'm receiving reports from across 7 sectors. Human vessels are attacking our supply lines. Mining stations and patrol fleets, they're everywhere at once." Sarah Chen sat calmly in her restraint field, apparently unbothered by the chaos erupting around her. The Council had taken her prisoner the moment her transmission ended, but she seemed almost amused by their panic. "How many ships?" Vextar demanded, his scales cycling through agitated colors. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors can't get accurate readings. They're using some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered. What we thought were asteroids, derelict hulks, even space debris. They're all revealing themselves as human vessels. The Chancellor turned to glare at Sarah. Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. How do you possess technology? Superior to civilizations that have conquered stars for millennia? Sarah tilted her head thoughtfully. You know, that's an interesting question. See, while you were building your empire on fear and subjugation, we were doing something else entirely. Enlighten us, War Prime growled. We were learning. Sarah's voice carried a note of genuine sadness. Every war, every conflict, every time someone tried to conquer us or exterminate us, we studied them. We adapted. We got better. You've been at peace for 300 years. Do you know how long humans have been at war? The chamber fell silent except for the continuing stream of panicked reports from fleet commanders. All of it, Sarah continued. Every single day of our existence has been a struggle to survive. Against nature, against each other, against impossible odds. We've been preparing for this conversation our entire evolutionary history. A new voice crackled through the communications array. Admiral Reyes to all Galactic Council forces. You have 1 hour to release Ambassador Chen and withdraw from human space. This is your only warning. War Prime's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of dismissal. 1 hour? What can your pathetic fleet accomplish in 1 hour against the might of 17 civilizations? As if in answer, the chamber's massive viewing wall activated, showing the space around the council station. Where empty void had existed moments before, the darkness now crawled with human ships. Not 12 vessels. Hundreds. They had materialized. From nowhere, like ghosts becoming solid. But these weren't the sleek, pristine ships the council expected from a young civilization. They were scarred, modified, bristling with weapons that had clearly seen use. Each vessel told a story of survival, of battles fought in the dark between stars. My God, Admiral Kethvar whispered. They've been here the entire time. Watching. Waiting. Sarah smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't polite. Did you really think we'd come to your capital with just 1 ambassador and hope for the best? Humans don't work that way. We plan for the worst-case scenario, then we plan for something even worse than that. The communication array erupted with reports from across the galaxy. Human ships were hitting military installations, freeing enslaved populations, and broadcasting liberation messages in every known language. The careful order that had held the galaxy in line for centuries was crumbling in real time. Impossible, Vextar breathed. No species could coordinate an operation of this scale. You're right, Sarah agreed. No single species could. But we're not alone out here. She gestured to the viewing wall where ships of unfamiliar design were joining the human fleet. Turns out. When you spend 3 centuries oppressing entire civilizations, some of them start looking for allies. The truth hit the council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war, they'd been building a coalition. Every enslaved species, every oppressed world, every civilization that had bent the knee while dreaming of freedom had been secretly contacted, armed, and organized. You see, Sarah said, standing as her restraint field mysteriously deactivated. There's something you never understood about humans. We don't just fight for ourselves. We fight for everyone who can't fight back. The chamber shook as explosions bloomed across the station's shields. That hour I mentioned? Sarah checked her watch. It's up. The Galactic Council's war room had become a symphony of panic. Holographic displays showed red alerts blinking across 17 star systems as human-led forces systematically dismantled 3 centuries of Imperial control. Fleet Admiral Thekron of the Dominion Navy slammed his armored fist against the tactical display. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered. Look at these battle reports. They're using our own strategies against us, but better, faster, more brutal. Sarah Chen stood in the center of the room, no longer a prisoner, but not quite a guest. The council had quickly learned that keeping Earth's ambassador close meant getting real-time intelligence about humanity's capabilities. What they learned terrified them. Explain this, War Prime demanded, pointing at a tactical replay. Your ships are outnumbered 50 to 1 at the Kepler mining station. Yet you achieved total victory with 0 losses. How? Sarah watched the replay with professional interest. Humans have a saying: if you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck. We don't believe in fair fights. The replay showed human ships emerging from the asteroid field, not hiding behind the rocks, but actually built into them. Hollowed out, asteroids had been converted into mobile weapons platforms, indistinguishable from natural debris until they opened fire. Impossible engineering, Admiral Cathavar muttered. The power requirements alone. You've been thinking about war all wrong, Sarah interrupted. You see it as a show of strength. Display your mighty fleets, intimidate your enemies into submission. Very civilized, very neat. She gestured to another display showing the liberation of Sigma Colony. Humans see war as problem-solving. How do you defeat an enemy with superior numbers? You change the rules. How do you fight ships you can't match in direct combat? You don't fight them directly. The tactical display showed human forces using the colony's own mining lasers as weapons, turning industrial equipment into planet-cracking artillery. Simultaneously, sleeper agents among the supposedly loyal alien workforce had sabotaged every critical system. These colonists were conquered 50 years ago, Vexitar growled. How did your people reach them? Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. Who said we reached them? They reached us. She activated a personal communicator. Tell them, Marcus. A weathered human face appeared on screen, clearly a miner, his hands stained with decades of hard labor. Ambassador, the council boys want to know how we got organized, eh? Please explain to the gentleman how the human underground operates. Marcus grinned, revealing teeth replaced with metal. Well, counselors, funny thing about enslaving people, they tend to remember who their friends are. Word spreads. A whisper here, a hidden message there. Been passing information through the mining networks for 30 years, waiting for the day Earth came looking for us. 30 years, War Prime repeated in disbelief. Every human colony that's been conquered, every worker who's been enslaved, every family that's been separated, Sarah explained. They've all been waiting, building networks, gathering intelligence, preparing for liberation. A new alert blazed across the screens. The fortress world of Draconis Prime, considered impregnable for 2 centuries, had just fallen to human forces. But the tactical data showed something impossible. The attack had come from inside the planet's core. How? Vextar demanded. Sarah pulled up the geological surveys. Draconis Prime is mostly hollow, an ancient mining world. Your people built their fortress on the surface and forgot about the tunnels below. Humans never forget about tunnels. We've been living in the planet's core for 6 months, building our forces, waiting for the right moment. Admiral Thekron stared at the data in horror. 6 months? But we scan every transport, every supply ship. You scan for weapons and technology, Sarah agreed. You don't scan for people willing to hide in cargo containers for weeks at a time, breathing recycled air and eating nutrient paste, just for the chance to dig tunnels in secret. The truth was becoming clear to the council members. Humanity hadn't just prepared for war. They'd prepared for a specific kind of war. A war of patience, deception, and sacrifice that their civilized enemies couldn't comprehend. This is madness, War Prime declared. No rational species would endure such conditions for an uncertain victory. Sarah's expression grew cold. Rational? You want to talk about rational? She activated another display, showing images from the slave colonies. Your rational empire has been torturing entire civilizations for 3 centuries. Separating families, crushing cultures, treating sentient beings like livestock. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? The war room shook as another fortress world fell. The scary part? Sarah continued quietly. This isn't even our main force. Everything you've seen so far, that's just the advanced scouts clearing the way. She checked her chronometer. The real fleet arrives in 6 hours. In the sudden silence, every alien in the room realized the same terrifying truth. They had been fighting humanity's reconnaissance force. The actual war hadn't even begun. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened in a bunker 3 miles beneath the capital station's surface. What had been the galaxy's seat of power for 3 centuries now resembled a war-torn command center. with holographic displays showing the systematic collapse of their empire. High Chancellor Vextar's scales had lost their vibrant colors, fading to the dull gray of exhaustion and fear. Around the circular table, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations looked like broken shadows of their former selves. "Status report," Vextar croaked. Admiral Thecaron's multiple arms moved across his control interface with desperate efficiency. 47 star systems have declared independence and joined the human coalition. 62 fortress worlds have fallen. Our slave labor force has decreased by 78% due to mass liberation operations. And our fleet strength? 60% losses across all sectors. But Chancellor, the Admiral's voice cracked. It's not just the ships we're losing. It's the crews. They're surrendering. Entire battle groups are switching sides. Sarah Chen sat quietly in the corner, no longer restrained or guarded. The Council had learned that trying to contain a human was pointless when humans had already infiltrated every level of their society. Better to keep her close and hope for mercy. "Explain," Warprime demanded. Sarah stood and approached the central display. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, she activated a recording from the recently surrendered Dreadnought Terminus. Captain Velthar of the Hegemony Navy appeared on screen, his proud bearing replaced by something like shame. "This is Captain Velthar to all Hegemony forces. I am formally surrendering my vessel to the Human Liberation Fleet. My crew and I, we've seen the evidence." The recording cut to footage from the liberated mining colonies. Children, some barely old enough to walk, working in radioactive tunnels. Families torn apart and sold to different systems. Entire species systematically starved to maintain economic efficiency. "We were told we were maintaining order," Captain Velthar continued. "We were told the subject species were happy, well treated. We were told we were the heroes of this galaxy." His voice broke. "We were lied to." The recording ended. The bunker fell silent except for the distant rumble of human ships patrolling overhead. "Propaganda," Warprime declared, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Sarah said quietly. "Truth. Something your empire has been avoiding for 3 centuries. She pulled up another display, this one showing population statistics. "Do you want to know what humans call this? Genocide. The systematic extermination of entire cultures." "We never killed entire species," Vextar protested. "You didn't have to." Sarah's fingers danced across the interface, showing demographic data that made several council members visibly recoil. Separate families, prevent reproduction, work populations, to death and replace them with new slaves. Cultural extinction is still extinction. Admiral Kethvar floated closer to the display, his bioluminescent patches flickering with distress. "These numbers, if they're accurate, we've overseen the elimination of over 200 distinct civilizations." 237, Sarah corrected. "We've been counting." Warprime slammed his fists on the table. "What do you want from us? Surrender? Total capitulation?" "Actually," Sarah said, "we want to show you something." The display shifted to show a human fleet, not the guerrilla forces they'd been fighting, but a proper battle fleet. Massive dreadnoughts, flanked by carriers, their hulls scarred from countless battles. But surrounding the human ships were vessels from dozens of species the Council had never seen before. "Meet Earth's real allies," Sarah announced. "The ones who got away." The revelation hit like a physical blow. These weren't just the species the Council had conquered. These were civilizations that had fled before the expansion, building their own coalition in the galaxy's dark spaces. "For 300 years, you've been the big fish in a small pond," Sarah continued. "You controlled the inhabited galaxy and assumed that was everything. But space is vast, and the survivors have been busy." A new voice joined the conversation. Elderly, dignified, speaking with the authority of ages. "Chancellor Vextar. I am Elder Krishan of the Free Worlds Alliance. We meet again." Vextar's scales went completely white. "Impossible. The Krishan civilization was destroyed centuries ago." "Scattered," the Elder corrected. "Not destroyed. We've been waiting in the void between galaxies, building our strength, preparing for this day. When the humans found us, we found kindred spirits, another species that refuses to kneel. The tactical display updated, showing the true scope of the forces arrayed against the Council. It wasn't just a rebellion. It was an invasion. A galaxy-spanning coalition that dwarfed the Council's military by orders of magnitude. "This is impossible," Admiral Thekron whispered. "The logistics alone. The coordination required." "Humans are very good at impossible things," Sarah said. "We've had practice." She gestured to the display showing Earth itself, not the small blue world the Council remembered, but a fortress planet surrounded by orbital shipyards that stretched from the Moon to Mars. "Did you really think," Sarah asked gently, "that a species capable of reaching the stars would only build 12 ships?" The bunker shook as something massive settled into orbit above them. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the shadow of a human dreadnought, larger than anything in the Council's fleet. "The war is over," Sarah announced. "The question now is whether you surrender with dignity, or whether we have to. Explain to 200 liberated species why their former oppressors deserve mercy." In the silence that followed, every member of the Galactic Council finally understood the truth. They had never been the apex predators they believed themselves to be. They had simply been alone in the dark, mistaking the absence of challenges for the proof of their supremacy. The real monsters had been waiting patiently in the shadows, and now they had come to collect their due. The surrender ceremony took place on the neutral station of Haven Point, built by human engineers in the brief weeks following the Council's capitulation. Unlike the imposing grandeur of the old Council chambers, this space was utilitarian, metal and ceramic, built for function rather than intimidation. Former High Chancellor Vextar stood in simple gray clothing, his ceremonial scales dulled by defeat and the weight of revelation. Around him, the surviving members of the Galactic Council waited in similar attire. No crowns, no weapons, no symbols of the power they had wielded for 3 centuries. Across from them sat the Liberation Coalition's leadership. Humans, yes, but also representatives from species the Council had forgotten existed. The Krishan Elder, his ancient form supported by technology beyond the Council's understanding. Captain Velthar, who had defected with his entire fleet, and dozens of others, representing worlds that had suffered under the Council's rule. Sarah, Chen stood between the two groups, no longer an ambassador, but something new. A mediator between the old galaxy and whatever was coming next. "Before we begin," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "I want everyone to understand what this is. This isn't a punishment trial. This isn't revenge. This is about truth, justice, and building something better." War Prime, his massive frame diminished by the loss of his ceremonial armor, scoffed. "Pretty words from the conquerors." "We didn't conquer anyone," replied Captain Sarah Martinez, one of the human fleet commanders. "We liberated them. There's a difference." "Is there?" Vexitar asked bitterly. "You destroyed our fleets, occupied our worlds, forced our surrender. How is that different from what we did?" Elder Chris Han's ancient voice filled the chamber. "Because, Chancellor, when my people begged for mercy, you showed us only cruelty. When your people begged for mercy, the humans showed them sanctuary." The display screens around the chamber activated, showing footage from the Council worlds. But instead of conquest and destruction, they showed human medics treating wounded Council soldiers, human engineers repairing civilian infrastructure, human diplomats negotiating peaceful surrenders that preserved local governments. "We could have glass-plated every Council world," Admiral Reyes stated matter-of-factly. "We had the firepower. Instead, we chose a different path." "Why?" War Prime demanded. "We enslaved your people. We threatened your world. We would have destroyed you without hesitation." Sarah Chen walked to the center of the chamber. "Because that's not who we are. Humans learned something your empire never did. That strength isn't about who you can destroy. It's about who you can save." She gestured to another display showing the liberated mining colonies. Former slaves were working alongside their liberators, rebuilding their shattered worlds. Children were playing in gardens instead of laboring. In mines, families were reuniting after decades of separation. "Every human crew, every soldier, every engineer out there," Sarah continued, "they're not fighting for conquest. They're fighting so that little girl on mining station Theta can grow up free." So that Zephyrian father can see his children again. So that Korthak artists can create beauty instead of weapons. Admiral Thekron looked up from his position among the defeated council members. What happens to us now? Execution? Imprisonment? That's up to the people you oppressed, Sarah replied. We're establishing truth and reconciliation councils on every liberated world. Your former subjects will decide your fate. Some will demand blood, War Prime pointed out. Some will, Sarah agreed. And some will choose mercy. That's their right. But before anyone makes those decisions, they're going to hear the truth. All of it. The displays changed again, showing massive archive ships, human vessels packed with recording equipment and historians. They were systematically documenting every crime, every injustice, every act of cruelty committed by the Council's empire. But they were also recording acts of kindness, moments of resistance, stories of hope that had survived even the darkest oppression. History, Elder Krishan observed, written by the survivors instead of the victors. Vextar looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of beings whose species he had once dominated. What did we become? He whispered. How did we fall so far? You forgot, said a new voice. The speaker was small, barely 4 feet tall, with the delicate features of the Pixari species. The Council had enslaved her people 2 centuries ago, using their natural dexterity for precision manufacturing. You forgot that we were people, not property. Other voices joined hers. A Zephyrian scientist whose research had been stolen and weaponized, a Korthak poet whose cultural heritage had been systematically erased, a hegemony engineer whose family had been sold to different systems as punishment for his inefficiency. You forgot, they said in unison, that everyone deserves to be free. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks, not for the defeated council, but for the centuries of suffering that could have been prevented. The good news, she said, is that forgetting isn't permanent. You can choose to remember. You can choose to be better. She activated one final display, showing plans for the new Galactic government. Not an empire or a council, but a federation. Every species with an equal voice. Every world with the right to self-determination. Military forces dedicated to protection, not conquest. This is what we're building, Sarah announced. A galaxy where strength protects the weak, where diversity is celebrated, where no one kneels to anyone else. Vextar studied the plans, his dulled scales slowly beginning to show hints of their old color. You would trust us to be part of this. After everything we've done? Trust is earned, Sarah replied. But everyone deserves the chance to earn it. She extended her hand to the former chancellor. The question is, are you ready to help us build something better? For a long moment, Vextar stared at the offered hand. Around the chamber, former enemies and liberated slaves watched in silence as history balanced on a single choice. Finally, the old chancellor reached out and clasped Sarah's hand in his scaled grip. Yes, he said quietly. I think it's time we remembered how to be worthy of trust. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. 6 months after the liberation, the galaxy looked nothing like the sterile empire the Council had maintained for 3 centuries. On the former capital station, now renamed Unity Station, beings from hundreds of species moved freely through corridors that once echoed with the footsteps of oppressors. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck, watching construction ships from a dozen different species working together to build the new Federation headquarters. Human engineering merged with Krishan architecture, while Zephyrian biotechnology integrated seamlessly with Korthak manufacturing techniques. It was chaotic, inefficient, and absolutely beautiful. Second thoughts? Asked Captain Martinez, joining her at the window. Every day, Sarah admitted. This is the hardest thing humanity has ever attempted. Harder than the war? Sarah laughed, but there was exhaustion in it. Wars are simple. You identify the enemy, you defeat them, you win. Peace? Peace is complicated. Through the window, they could see a group of young beings from various species playing together in the station's new recreational area. A human child was teaching a Pixari how to throw a ball while a young Zephyrian floated nearby, trying to understand the game's rules. It was a scene that would have been impossible under the old regime. "Status report on the integration efforts?" Sarah asked. Martinez consulted her tablet. "Better than expected. Worse than we hoped. The Truth and Reconciliation Councils have processed about 60% of the cases. Most are choosing community service over imprisonment. The former council leadership has been surprisingly helpful." It was true. Vextar, stripped of his title but not his intelligence, had become one of the Federation's most valuable advisors. His intimate knowledge of the old system's weaknesses was proving invaluable in building something better. Warprime had established a military academy that taught defense tactics to former slave species, helping them protect their newly won freedom. "Problems?" Sarah asked. "Because there were always problems. The usual. Some species want revenge, not justice. Others want to establish their own mini-empires now that they're free. And we're still finding hidden facilities, research labs, prison colonies, worse things." Sarah nodded grimly. They'd discovered horrors that made the surface atrocities look mild by comparison. Genetic experimentation, forced breeding programs, entire species reduced to biological components. The cleanup would take decades. "But there's good news, too," Martinez continued. "The Outer Rim colonies have exceeded all production quotas. Turns out people work harder when they're working for themselves. The new trade agreements are generating prosperity levels we never imagined. And..." She paused, smiling. "And the birth rates." "Sarah, the birth rates across liberated worlds have increased by 300%. Families are reuniting, new families are forming. For the first time in centuries, species are actually growing instead of just surviving." Sarah felt some of the weight lift from her shoulders. "That's worth celebrating." Speaking of which, Martinez gestured toward the station's main plaza. "The ceremony starts in an hour." The ceremony. Today marked 6 months since liberation, and the newly formed Federation was officially ratifying its charter. Representatives from over 400 species would sign a document that guaranteed rights, freedoms, and protections that most had never imagined possible. As they walked through the station toward the ceremony hall, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The sterile corridors of the old council station had been replaced with vibrant markets, art galleries, and cultural centers. Different species weren't just coexisting, they were thriving together. In the medical bay, human doctors worked alongside Zephyrian healers and Krishan biospecialists, combining their knowledge to treat patients they could never have helped alone. The engineering decks buzzed with collaborative projects that pushed the boundaries of known science. "Ambassador Chen," called a familiar voice. Elder Krishan approached, moving more easily now thanks to human medical technology that had restored much of his ancient species' vitality. "Elder," Sarah bowed respectfully. "Are you ready for the ceremony?" "More than ready. My people have waited 7 centuries to see this day." His expression grew serious. "But I have concerns. Tell me. The outer territories. We're receiving reports of entire star systems that the Council never catalogued. Species that hid so well they were never discovered. They're suspicious of any galactic government." Sarah frowned. "How many?" "Unknown. Potentially thousands of species. They call themselves the Hidden Nations, and they want nothing to do with any galactic authority, including ours." It was a reminder that the galaxy was far larger and more complex than even the expanded Federation realized. How many species had learned to hide so well that they'd remained completely unknown? How many had developed in isolation, creating their own technologies and cultures? "They think we're just another empire," Martinez observed. "Can you blame them?" Sarah asked. "From their perspective, we conquered the galaxy just like the Council did." "So what do we do?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the diverse crowds moving through the station. Humans walked alongside former Council species, who walked alongside liberated slaves, who walked alongside beings from the far reaches of known space. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still problems. But it was working. "We do what we've always done," she said finally. "We prove who we are through our actions. The Hidden Nations will watch us, judge us, test us. Eventually they'll make contact on their own terms. And if they're hostile," Sarah smiled, "then we'll handle it the human way. with patience, determination, and the absolute certainty that freedom is worth fighting for. They reached the ceremony hall as the first delegates were taking their seats. Hundreds of species, thousands of representatives, all gathered to sign a document that would reshape the galaxy forever. As Sarah took her place at the podium, she looked out at the assembled beings and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. The war had been won. The peace was being built. And somewhere in the dark between stars, other species were watching, waiting to see if this new federation would be different from what came before. Sarah had no doubt they would be convinced. After all, humans had spent their entire history proving that the impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. The real adventure was just beginning. 1 year after Liberation Day, Sarah Chen stood in a place that shouldn't exist, a massive space station orbiting a star that didn't appear on any council charts. Around her, representatives from the hidden nations moved like ghosts made flesh, being so alien that human eyes struggled to process their forms. "You came," observed the entity that called itself the Curator. Its voice seemed to originate from the air itself rather than any visible mouth. "Despite our warnings, despite our threats, despite clear instructions to stay away. Humans are notoriously bad at following instructions," Sarah replied calmly. "Especially when those instructions involve ignoring people who might need help." The Curator's form shifted. Part energy, part matter, impossible to categorize. "Help? You think we need help from a species that has existed for barely 1,000,000 years?" Around the chamber, other beings from the hidden nations observed the conversation. Sarah counted at least 30 different species, though some were so fundamentally different from baseline biology that species might not be the right term. These were civilizations that had evolved in secret for millions of years, developing technologies and capabilities that made council science look like stone tools. "Everyone needs help sometimes," Sarah said. "Even ancient beings who can manipulate matter at the quantum level." A ripple of something like surprise passed through the assembled beings. The Curator's form stabilized into something almost humanoid. "You know what we are," we suspected. "A civilization that could hide entire star systems from galactic surveys? That's not just advanced technology, that's reality manipulation. The question is, why did you finally make contact?" The chamber walls became transparent, revealing the view outside. Sarah's breath caught. This wasn't just a space station, it was a mobile city, traveling between dimensions. And they weren't alone. Dozens of similar constructs floated in space. Around them, each one representing a different species from the hidden nations. "Because," the Curator said, "something is coming. Something that makes your little council look like children playing with toys." The display changed, showing the edge of the galaxy. But instead of empty space, there were shapes moving in the darkness. Massive, organic-looking structures that seemed to bend light around them. "The Devourers," whispered another being, this one resembling crystallized thought. "They have consumed 17 galaxies. They learn from each one, becoming stronger, more perfect. They are inevitable." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "How long do we have?" "Perhaps 50 of your years, perhaps less." They move slowly but inexorably, converting everything in their path into extensions of their collective consciousness. And you've been hiding from them. "We have been preparing," the Curator corrected, "building defenses, developing weapons, creating contingencies. But we cannot face them alone. No single species can." Sarah processed this information, her mind racing through implications. "That's why you revealed yourselves now. You need allies. We need more than allies," the crystalline being interjected. "We need something we have never seen before. A species capable of uniting others, of inspiring hope in the face of impossible odds." The Curator's attention focused on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. "We have watched your species for decades. Your war against the Council was illuminating. You did not simply conquer. You liberated. You did not rule through fear. You led through inspiration. Most importantly, you turned enemies into allies. The hidden nations have tried to work together before," another being added, its form resembling living shadow. We are too different, too ancient, too set in our ways. We cannot find common ground. But you found common ground with species that enslaved you. Sarah felt the weight of galactic survival settling on her shoulders. What exactly are you asking? The curator gestured, and the chamber filled with holographic displays showing the true scope of the hidden nations. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, technologies that bordered on godlike power. But despite all their advantages, they remained fragmented, isolated, unable to unite against the coming threat. We want you to do what you did with the Council, the curator said simply. Build a coalition, create unity where none existed before. Help us become something greater than the sum of our parts. And in return? In return, we share everything. Technology that could make your species immortal. Scientific knowledge that could unlock the secrets of reality itself. Weapons that could crack stars. Everything we have learned in millions of years of existence. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the impossible vista of interdimensional space. Finally, she asked the question that mattered most. What makes you think the Devourers can be stopped at all? The beings around her exchanged communications in frequencies beyond human perception. Finally, the curator answered. Because they have a weakness. They consume and convert, but they do not create. They learn and adapt, but they do not innovate. They are perfect predators, but they lack something your species possesses in abundance. Which is? The ability to do impossible things when everything depends on it. Sarah almost laughed. That's it? That's your great plan? Hope that humans will figure out something that civilizations millions of years old couldn't? Not just humans, the shadow being corrected. All of us, working together. The hidden nation's knowledge, the Federation's unity, humanity's stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The curator's form shifted into something almost resembling a smile. You see, Ambassador Chen, we have studied your species extensively. Every great crisis in human history has produced the same result. Your people unite, adapt, and find solutions that should be impossible. Your entire evolutionary history is a catalog of successful, impossible things. Sarah thought about Earth's history. Surviving ice ages, developing agriculture, building civilization, reaching for the stars. Every step had seemed impossible until humans made it inevitable. There's something else, the crystalline being added. The Devourers have consumed 17 galaxies, but they have never encountered a species like yours. Every civilization they've faced has either submitted, fought individually, or hidden in fear. None have done what you did to the Council, transform enemies into family. You think that matters? We think it's the only thing that matters. The Devourers are coming whether we resist or not. The only question is whether we face them as scattered, frightened individuals, or as a united galaxy fighting for everything. We love. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the enormity of the decision ahead. 50 years to prepare for a threat that had consumed 17 galaxies. Thousands of species to unite, many of whom had never trusted anyone beyond their own kind. Technologies to master that could rewrite the laws of physics. It was impossible, which meant, by human standards, it was exactly the kind of challenge they were built for. All right, she said, opening her eyes. Let's save the galaxy. The chamber erupted in sounds that might have been cheering from beings whose vocal capabilities defied human comprehension. But underneath the alien cacophony, Sarah could swear she heard something that transcended species barriers. The sound of hope being born in the darkness between stars. As the hidden nations began revealing their technologies and the Federation prepared for the greatest challenge in galactic history, one thing became clear. Humanity had found its true purpose among the stars. They weren't just explorers or warriors or diplomats. They were the species that turned impossible odds into inevitable victories. They were the ones who looked at insurmountable challenges and asked not, how can we survive this, but how can we turn this into something better? The Devourers were coming, but they had never faced a united galaxy before. They had never encountered a species that specialized in doing impossible things. They had never met the humans and their allies, who had spent a year proving that the strongest force in the universe wasn't technology or numbers or ancient wisdom. It was the simple, stubborn belief that everyone deserved to be free, and that any price was worth paying to make that freedom real. The real war was about to begin, and this time, the galaxy would be ready. End of Beneath the Politeness, the day the galaxy feared humanity.